Hello there, my name is Derek Mallow. Welcome to Mallow Media. And today I am going to talk about a subject that's very near and dear to my heart. That is, of course, Vaporwave. I do consider myself to be a Vaporwave scholar. Thank you very much. But if you don't know what Vaporwave is, you're probably asking yourself, why the hell did I click on this video? Well, stay put, because I need you. Stay there. Seriously. I'll tell you, you little bitch. Vaporwave is the memory of a ghost from the future. Pink and blue gradients. Nihongo des! The 1980s. The 1990s. The smooth, sweet taste of Arizona green tea. I can taste the aesthetics. I want to say Arizona green tea is not the official sponsor of this video. I'm not that cool to have sponsors yet, but if you guys want to be my first, I would love that. Enough malarkey. What is Vaporwave? It's a subgenre of electronic music born and raised from internet meme culture that is centered around feelings of nostalgia for a time that's never existed. Originally, I was going to do like a history report on the whole genre, but I looked around and I've seen it's been done better on other channels. Down the Rabbit Hole has a really good video on it, but this is not his channel. This is my channel. Let's keep the focus here on me. So I'm going to do a top 10 list because I know the internet loves lists, top 10s, and albums in that order. And a lot of these albums are historic in the context of the genre anyway. If you really don't know what Vaporwave is, a lot of these albums are also going to be a good gateway for you, a good place to start and see if you like it. I hope you do. I also want to clarify, despite being a top 10 list, this isn't ranked. All these albums are 10s in my eyes. I would have babies with each one of them and move to the suburbs and have a nice life, if I could. This album is rightfully credited as one of the first Vaporwave albums ever made, which is why I want to talk about it first. Despite being released, as much as I hate to say it, over a decade ago, it still holds up to the slew of imitators that would soon follow the leader. The elements that make up this album are very much the blueprints for early Vaporwave music. We have samples from 80s to 90s pop music, speed manipulation, especially when it's slowed down, and reverb. Gotta have that reverb. All this together creates a very existential listening experience that's either relaxing or eerie, depending on what drugs you're doing at the time. JK, folks, I don't do drugs. Are you kidding me? Many of these tracks are centered around one refrain from another song that just repeats over and over, which eventually gives them new meaning entirely. There's one track that just repeats, "One more year and I will be happy." It just sounds like someone is just trying to convince themselves that things are going to get better when they're not. And it's like 2020, man. My favorite track, simply titled A3, samples JoJo. No, not that JoJo. Hell no, not that one either. Yes, that one. It's 2005, and this is cool as hell. I like hearing a sample that comes from an earlier decade than the 80s, and the outro with Castles in the Sky riddles my body with anxiety because it never takes off. It just settles on asking you if you've seen Castles in the Sky. Well, yes, I've seen that Castles in the Sky. It is my favorite Miyazaki movie. Actually, that's Nazca. So this album laid down the foundation for early Vaporwave artists, but it still holds up today thanks to the creative use of plunderphonics from Daniel Loppleton. So there's a little history lesson right there. Within a year, we would have another landmark album for the genre, that was created on none other than Apple's GarageBand. Yes, I am talking about James Farraro's Far Side Virtual. The music of this album is somewhere in between a ringtone and the demo button on a synthesizer. Purely computerized. You couldn't find a single human fingerprint on this music. And this sterile side of music, along with the commentary on consumer culture, consumerism, I feel would be one of the starting points of inspiration for a subgenre known as mall soft, but this is certainly not a mall soft record by any means, because this album doesn't recreate the blissful shopping experience of walking around a mall. It recreates the future utopia that we were promised if we purchased Windows 95 and logged on to our AOL 2.0 to IM chat with Austin Powers from the hit film Goldmember.
Welcome, baby, yeah.
That was a real thing, by the way. Well, Vaporwave is typically centered around, being nostalgic for a past we never lived in. Farside Virtual is a future that we will never achieve. Certainly not in this timeline. This is one of the few early Vaporwave albums that music critics actually took seriously. A lot of the early Vaporwave albums they just wrote off as some dumb meme, which, yeah, a lot of them were, but, come on, some of this music is good. Pitchfork. Looking at you. A couple of Australian dudes named Penny and Lee set out to create a record to capture the feeling of watching old VHS tapes, and it doesn't get any more aesthetic than that. Instead of pursuing perfection, they focus purely on capturing the vibe. And if there's anything that this album does particularly very well, is vibe. I feel like I'm sipping down a B&J wine cooler on the back of a boat, watching the sun set, 1985 Vice City. That's what this album does to me. That's the place it puts me in. The mixture of live instrumentation, original vocals, along with plenty of samples, makes a fairly unique Vaporwave album, especially with the electric guitar. That's not an instrument you hear very often in Vaporwave music. The cheap radio style of mastering makes that guitar sound very sunburnt and faded. The vocals are drowned out amongst this distortion. It creates a very hazy, dreamlike soundscape. I recommend this album for everyone because it's on my list, but especially for fans of dream pop acts such as Ariel Pink, Maze Star, and Washed Out. Imagine, if you will, you can close your eyes if you want to. You're riding a motorcycle, a futuristic Akira anime motorcycle, towards a city of light that has all these Japanese letters everywhere. It's raining. It's always raining constantly. You are a cyborg. You don't know what it means to be a human, but you want to know. You do. These glasses don't work with this. These are the kind of thoughts that bubble up in my head while I'm listening to this album, and is certainly the intent behind the collaborative duo 2814. As if the album cover isn't clear enough, Blade Runner, more specifically that guy, whatever his name is, his soundtrack, very influential to this album. We have a more ambient take on Vaporwave with minimalistic melodies. We also have a lot of cinematic sound effects that are woven throughout the album. Like, you got police sirens and a sad Chinese lady. Those brief moments capture my imagination, and I wish there was more of them. But the melodies do capture my ear, so I do end up being engrossed with this record. My personal favorite track is True Love, or Shinjitsu no Koi, The percussion sort of imitates splashes of rain, really hard splashes of rain. And you have a wistful melody played on a synthesizer. It sounds like the light that's coming through dark clouds. It's funny, it's how much more, I'm talking more about visuals than instrumentals when it comes to this album, but I'm a kind of person who loves soundtracks and instrumentals, so this album really does appeal to me. If any of that sounds like your shit, I would definitely recommend this record for you. This album is significant because it's one of the few albums around that time, 2015-16, I believe, where there's starting to be a second wave of Vaporwave that was moving away from relying solely on samples. Not that there's anything wrong with that, of course, but it was a way to prove that this genre wasn't just a one-trick pony with 80s music samples, and it could do other things. While earlier Blank Banshee albums, such as Blank Banshee 0 and 1, are tied closer to Vaporwave than Mega, it's safe to say, though, Mega is his best record. The sounds being used here certainly are aesthetically friendly enough for the Vaporwave crowd, for Vaporwave fans, but the way that they're being used on this album is more akin to like drum and bass or breakbeat kind of stuff. A lot of people call this a vapor trap album, which is exactly what it sounds like. Vaporwave music, trap music, and that's all you really need to know. Blank Banshee does work in that style a lot. I'm going to keep the focus on this album. Despite the album's runtime being 2 mins shy over a half an hour, the tracks are loaded with a masterful complexity that invites multiple listens with a very good, decent pair of headphones. Blank Banshee loves his panning. You gotta have headphones for that. There are a few times I do wish the songs would linger on a certain phrase or an idea for just a little bit longer before shifting into the next idea, but it's still an outstanding album. The live vocals being sampled here are fairly unique. Sometimes they're very smooth choral pieces, and other times they're bombastic with grave energy. My favorite one from My Machine just sounds like an anime man because it's all like, I love that. I love that track. This balance of tones is what Blank Banshee does for the entire record. From new age tranquility to rapid fire urgency, it keeps you engaged for the entire short but sweet project. This album is one of the few side projects of George Clayton, aka the David Bowie of Vaporwave. I'm not really sure what that means entirely, but he is certainly a luminary in the genre. Similar to Blank Banshee's Mega, the album I just talked about, this album proves that there's room for stylistic growth and expansion. George uses little to no samples on this record. Not that there's anything wrong with that, of course, but it's incredible that despite a lack of samples, he is able to create an intensely nostalgic sound. Much of the mastering is intentionally lo-fi and distorted. The warm, fuzzy synths brings me back to booting up the PS1 on Saturday morning. You know, all those kind of childhood memories I thought I killed off from years of recreational drug use. And again, much like Blank Banshee's Mega, this album doesn't overstay its welcome, but it welcomes repeated visits. I'm officially out of different outfits to change into, so now I'm just going to rotate them. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot I know about the artists themselves, other than they also go by the moniker Disaster Radio, and they're based out of New Zealand, so g'day, mate. What I do know about Eyeliner is that Eyeliner is the purely Vaporwave side project, while as the work under Disaster Radio tends to lean more towards electro and synth pop. Each album they made as Eyeliner has gotten better and better, and this is the masterpiece. It's one of those albums where just about every track could be your favorite. I swear, there's a Seinfeld slap bass on every track throughout the entire album, and that could be your angel or your devil depending on who you are personally. For me, it's a slice of heaven. It's like the character in a sitcom that the audience claps for when they come out, and it's like, ah, slap bass, hey, slap bass, and you're just happy to see them. It's a huge part of this album's charm, and charm is definitely the word I think of the most when I listen to this record. Similar to Farside Virtual, Eyeliner uses VTS plugins with bold-face confidence and sincerity. However, unlike Farside Virtual, the timbre of the MIDI synthesizers have a lot more warmth to them, but I can still hear it being a huge inspiration behind this album. What I like most about this album, it covers the variety of moods, feels, and vibes that you get from Vaporwave music. There are songs that sound like fashion commercials, your local on the 8s with the Weather Channel, and early video game music, and it's all here in one cohesive album. I didn't really explain what MallSoft was exactly earlier in the video, but simply it's Vaporwave that's centered around shopping malls. Often the albums are more ambient and feature reverberated samples of light jazz to invoke images of wide open shopping centers during their glory days when they actually had customers. Sometimes you simply want to feel like you're in a shopping mall, sitting on a bench in the food court, passing out from all the greasy food you consumed at Orange Julius. And these albums, this one especially, provides that experience. As with any good ambient record, you can throw it on in the background as you go about your day, buy the groceries, pet a cat, do your laundry. Or if you wish to listen to it intently and find the samples and buried in the mix, it welcomes that as well. It's kind of funny, that's all I really have to say about this album. It is just a effective MallSoft album that's very calming and ambient. I threw it on the background a lot when I was writing up these scripts for this episode. I personally think this album deserves to be put up there on the pantheon of great MallSoft albums along the others like Discontinuous and Necocorp. Yeah. I said this list wasn't ranked, but I would be lying if I didn't say this is my favorite Vaporwave album, because it is. There's still Arizona green tea in here, but I warmed it up. It's fall. Death's Dynamic Shroud, WMV, are two, possibly three men who collaborate together and have made a plethora of albums, including a 80-something track behemoth. I have barely scratched the surface on that one. They have a very distinct style of using samples in a twisted, distorted way, and it's no exception on this album. The samples on this album are eclectic. Everything from Vines by Rebecca Black, iPhone ringtones, and Final Fantasy soundtracks all come together in a kaleidoscopic effect that just boggles my mind. My mind is thoroughly boggled by this album. As random as these samples seem to be, the more I listened intently, the more it became clear that there was a strong theme and ideas throughout the tracks. The music meditates on, among other things, the ubiquitous presence of social media and its effect on the human psyche. This begins at the very first track, Do You Like Me? Through all these apps and medias and other bullshit, we are seeking validation from people we know, people we don't know, And as someone who is starting a YouTube channel, that really cuts deep. There are also themes of hypersexualization in the media with track titles such as Thigh Gap or Girl on the Internet. These songs use samples from pop stars such as Miley Cyrus, Ariana Grande, and Katy Perry. I do not like Katy Perry. I love pop music, I love girly pop music, but I do not like Katy Perry. However, my favorite track on this album samples Katy Perry, and I love it. That is the power of Death's dynamic shroud. And since the title Classroom Sextape is a very fun thing to Google, I put a link down in the thing on Vapor Memory, which is an incredible channel, and all the other albums I talked about as well are down there in the thing. Special shout out to my boy, Bill Radovich. We have attended some kick-ass concerts together. He makes some music too, so I put a link to his thing in the thing. Check it out if you want to. You can also check out my Instagram for some hot, spicy feet pics. Maybe my Patreon if you're feeling generous, please. Otherwise, thank you for watching my video.